All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the first episode of the tentatively titled Meandering podcast. So, with me today are Ramon and Daryl, who will be the mainstays of future episodes for this podcast. I am Kevin, or more known as my in game name, Papa Stan, or everybody calls me by my last name, which is Liku. So we'll give a round of introductions first, then get into some topics that we've prepared for the podcast. So just to give an overview of the podcast, we're just here to discuss games, life experiences, anything under the sun, basically. But we're gonna discuss more about what we're more familiar with. So for me, my job is all about process improvement. So what does that mean? Basically, I started working right after graduation 2010, and was it 2010? No,
Yeah,
it's
we're back to
2014.
2014, man.
2014, I graduated college 2014, and then I immediately went into the workforce for back then in the Philippines. BPOs were very popular as a first job. So I got into Accenture, and from there started working as what they called um, business excellence. So what's business excellence? Basically, you have your process in the workplace. My job is to look at those little things inside your process and make sure that it's up to snuff, and I improve things that need to be improved. And now I've been in the same space for what, 7, 8 years, and now I'm in Japan doing the same thing for Cognizant and our client. There are client companies here that I do the same work. So now instead of looking into the process to improve it, I'm looking to the process to also improve it, but this time automate it. So there's this additional factor of coding, understanding what robots can do versus what only people could do. Okay, so right now I'm 29, and I've been living by myself for the past 3 to 4 years here in Japan. Yeah, it's been a great experience so far because when I was in high school, I really loved anime, and now I'm in the land of anime, but it 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 has jaded me, so to speak. And then the important games in my life, we'll start with this for everyone as well. First and foremost is Front Mission 3. It's this tactics game where you like control robots and you get to go to the Philippines, to Taal, to Batangas, and the Visayas. And then you try to save the world from this like weapon of mass destruction and so on. And then next would be StarCraft, Brood War, and Diablo, because these were the first games that were bought for us by my uncle, or by an uncle through, I guess, baptism, my godfather, uh, for our new computer back then, which was like 120 megahertz of power and didn't have any video cards and like 32 megabytes of RAM. Yeah, so my sister and I played StarCraft, Brood War, and Diablo was really scary for me back. I was like before 10 years old. Then, of course, during my high school years, there was Dota and League. It was very popular among us. And then, when I first got my PlayStation 2, Final Fantasy X was the first game that I ever bought. And it really, made a mark on me in terms of Japanese role playing games. Although I've played a lot of JRPGs before, like Final Fantasy X with its fully voice acted cast, like let me see how far games could go. Lastly is I guess the first FPS that I've really gone serious with, which is Counter Strike or CS 1.3. So yeah, those are my 5 important games. Let me segue to Ramon, and Ramon, please introduce yourself.
Hello, my name is Ramon. I'm currently in between jobs at the moment, but I started off in IT, even though my course was supposed to be chemistry, but I figured we couldn't let computers go, so that's where I went. And mostly now I'm project based copywriting and went to sales for a while as well. But yeah, you're here more for the games, I guess. And I don't have much to share in terms of jobs, so I'll just go ahead. The one of the first few games I remember when I was a grade two, long time ago. Final Fantasy Tactics.
Oof.
And one of the things that I remember back then was I tried early on, like gaming the system, not leaving a certain place until I was over leveled. And then as I grew older, I went back and said, "Oh my God, FF Tactics had like a storyline that's way deeper than a grade 2 or 3 could grasp." And it was a product of its time, but also I think the story was somewhat timeless. I mean, there have been more iterations of the same game that came out over the years, so there's that. After that would be a string of Blizzard games. Warcraft 2 actually started me off in the RTS genre. And that's why I loved Warcraft 3 a lot because there was a lot of quality life improvements. There were more races to play, there were more points of views to be had. And that's partially how I got into um, the more active types of games because when I was still playing Final Fantasy Tactics in PlayStation 1, there's also Breath of Fire, other
Mm-hmm.
RPG games where it was usually single player, but going into RTS, this is where you go to multiplayer and then maybe later on the MMORPG. And like Lico, I started FPS with Counter-Strike 1.3. I would remember going back from school and not going straight home and no one knew that I was playing computer shops because that was how we rolled back then. And that segues into, I guess, Dota 1, which was still a Warcraft 3 mod at that point, and then into League of Legends, into Dota 2. I'm sure we're going to get into MOBAs at some point here.
For sure, for
And
sure.
then after that would be, I guess, in terms of storytelling, one of the more memorable games I've played was Mass Effect 1 to 3, even though the ending wasn't up to snuff for a lot of people, but we're going to discuss at some point why, I suppose. And then after that would be Dragon Age Origins. I guess I like Bioware games. Kind of biased, and I'm kind of sad where they went at this point. But again, more discussions on those when we get to those topics, I guess. That's it. That's it for me.
Okay, thanks, Mon. I guess just to provide some context for listeners, we're all native Filipinos and we speak English and Tagalog fluently. So you might notice us slip some Tagalog words there, but yeah. Let's go to Daryl now for his introduction.
Hi, I'm Daryl, and it's hard to explain what I do, but I work in art and I used to work in video games as a writer. I reviewed video games in the early 10s, and now I do freelance graphics and videos and photography. The most important games that I've experienced, at least, is the Doom franchise.
Doom for
Oh, yeah.
1980s
That,
level of yeah.
that was my first FPS ever, and I remember playing it on DOS. And then the Metroid series, which I love to this day. And I guess to an extent, Neverwinter Nights, when it came out on the PC in the early 2000s.
Mm-hmm.
That got me into paper D&D. And I guess Gunbound to an extent, because I played that
Bro.
religiously.
SS. God,
Yeah,
Godbound,
man.
man.
And I got really into it, and that's how that was my first introduction to competitive gaming. And then, of course, Defense of the Ancients through Warcraft 3. And I guess that's it. That's it for now.
Okay, so we're probably going to have a discussion on MOBAs in some future episode. But for
Yep.
today, I think we're gonna discuss one of the topics that are this topical in one of or probably most of the online competitive games that we have right now. So all three of us are playing Valorant recently, and we have experience playing Dota 2 and other online games. But and I believe we all have this experience of people smurfing in your competitive league or in your competitive ranking. So just to give an explanation to people who don't understand what smurfing is, it's basically um if you go into an online game, you're ranked based on your skill. So after a few games, the game is telling you, hey, you're gold rank or hey, you're silver rank, and this is your skill level. But people on the top echelons of the game. These are the guys who play the game nonstop or just have the talent for it. They either buy accounts that are low level or they create new accounts that are not yet ranked, and then they get on the rank queues and basically play with people way below their skill level. So it results in people not having fun because this guy is just stomping on them all throughout the game, or uh, basically the one guy carrying in his entire team to a higher rank while they're not at that skill level. But the other guy is, they go into the median. If one guy is at say platinum and the rest are all bronze league, he would carry them to say gold. But only one guy is contributing to that push while the rest of them still remain on their skill level. So what we're discussing would be, how does one, or how do devs make the casual experience for more casual gamers for a competitive game better. So we wrote down some points here that we'd like to discuss. Yeah, so I guess, what are your thoughts on smurfing in general, guys?
Uh, One of the hardest things for me to deal with smurfing is, I'm just gonna outright say it, is part of the hypocrisy. I mean, when you're on the end where you're fighting a smurf and you're on the low level side and the smurf's on the high level side, of course you're gonna be bitching about it, right? But I've
Mm-hmm.
also had my own experience smurfing before, because back when I was playing high level league, the queues here, at least in the Philippines, would reach from 15 to 20, sometimes even 30 minutes on the
Damn.
upper levels. And sometimes the games were shorter than the queue times, and couldn't afford wasting time, wanted to play the game. So we'd quote unquote play for the lulz, make a smurf. And yeah, being on both sides, it's really hard justifying, like, oh, is it fair? Probably not. Is it a bannable offense? Yes, but like even even streamers these days have Smurfs, and they're like high profile. Is this one of those things that are like unacceptable on paper, but in practice, quote unquote, everyone is doing? And yeah, I guess that's why we're in this topic in the first place. Like, is there something to be done about this?
I'm not gonna lie. I also had a Smurf when I used to play whichever game, and it's I don't think it's all about stomping on lower level dudes. Because
Mm-hmm.
sometimes it's all about playing with friends who aren't on the same level as you are. And
Yeah.
the only way to do that is to make a Smurf, right?
Yep.
So it's a grayish area that needs to be explored.
And it's not as cut and dry as like, oh, if you wanted to smurf, just play casual. Oh, if you want to smurf, go unrated, go unranked. It's different from competitive. Siege has something like, what was that mode called? Yeah, well, it's called
Newcomer.
newcomer. Yeah, where they'd specifically put all the new players there so they can learn the game, and they can expect that other people are also newcomers. But then there are some long-time players whose skill levels, let's be real, whose skill levels just don't improve, and they're fine where they are. But it
Oof.
can be frustrating when you're fighting. Like you said, not everyone plays the game competitively. You can be a long-time player because you like the game casually, and that's fine.
And you like playing with
Right?
friends,
You like playing with friends, and sometimes those friends are higher, lower skill level than you. So is the onus on the developer? They just find better friends to play with, quote unquote. Surely that won't be the answer, right? But like, balancing in itself is probably always going to be an issue in games. So
Well, we can agree. We can agree that, although Daryl just said that it's a gray area because it's
Mm.
not really, there's no malice behind it. You
Not
can
always,
yeah,
but
yeah,
then
they're not
again, it's not
always.
something that you can like ask. Oh, are you stomping because you're playing with friends? Or are you stomping because you need to let some steam out? I mean,
Yeah, yeah.
right?
So it's a gray area, right? It's a gray area, but can we all agree that it is bad for the experience?
In general, yeah.
It's bad for the
Mm,
experience.
I want to say
Like
yes, but not
like
I
on
want
the
to
really.
say yes, but like
spectrum. Like,
as a guy with a Smurf, like,
I mean, I think all of us here have a Smurf at some
yeah,
point, right?
yeah.
On the spectrum of good and bad, because they were talking about morals here, and more specifically morals in the ranked queue, right? We're
Yeah, morals are
really, yeah, but so it's more on the spectrum, like say 75% or 60% on the worst scale, on the worst, on the bad kind of area. Would you say? Would you say it like that, or um, would you say it's neutral?
it hinges more on bad, but I don't think it's like that bad.
It's not a bannable offense. It's not a bannable offense.
It's
Why
a
should it
bannable
be?
offense if you use it on like rank. But then again, yeah, I don't know. Do you
Well,
want to lift the skill level of your friends? That's why you're like
because
quote unquote carry.
the reason why you're smurfing really is very small compared to the experience of the people you're smurfing on.
Yeah,
Say you're freaking immortal and you go into the Valorant queue and go to bronze. Like, oh, you may be having fun, but probably 9 out of the 10 people in that lobby aren't having fun
because you're the one killing
because you're
everything.
just running around clicking heads, right?
Here's the thing, though. That's one game in X amount of games that you'll play down the line, right?
And one reason in how many reasons.
Exactly.
That's why we're talking about this. Like, how do you so quote unquote solve that? More game modes,
Well, a
more
lot of
flexibility,
developers I think have implemented some backend solutions. Like I remember in Dota we had MMRs for the group.
hidden MMRs, and you
Yeah,
would
yeah, yeah.
match an MMR as a group in an enemy team, right?
Mm.
But that's not necessarily that's an okay solution. But in a game like Dota, where the carry can carry,
Scary.
it takes just that one person who brings the yellow up to win. And if that one person is miles ahead of, let's say, 4,000 and then the rest are 1,000 versus a team of 2,000, is that fair in a game like Dota?
Well, the more games he plays with that group,
Hmm.
then either their MMR rises or falls. So
But
it
we're
really,
assuming that this is a guy smurfing to play with his friends. What if this is just a guy smurfing, like, maliciously? And how can the back end or the developers determine between the two? I think that's what's difficult. Because
mm,
without a doubt, there is smurfing that's malicious, obviously.
But
But
that's
there's also
already out of the system.
exactly. So what's the
the
is there a solution, or do we just have to like live with it? You
I
know?
think you can put in some backend controls like the group MMR thing, and then there's also the active measures, which is your Counter Strike. What do you call that? The not the Vanguard, where you watch a replay of a cheater, quote unquote.
Yeah, yeah. The match
Right.
replays, like
Yeah, the
Yeah,
whatever you call
Overwatch,
it.
Overwatch,
Overwatch.
Yeah,
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 Overwatch,
it's Overwatch.
Overwatch. So I think in games in first person shooters where okay this guy is smurfing, like he's acing round per round and he looks like he isn't cheating, but if he keeps on getting consistent 3Ks 4Ks and everybody else looks like their aim, because it's very obvious if you're bronze and silver your aim is
Higher
going to
aim
be
looks like.
way
Yeah.
different from a guy who's in diamond, platinum, or immortal, right? So if they report you for smurfing, then it should be handled by maybe someone from the community who has like an upstanding rep, so similar to like Dota or CS:GO, where they
CS:GO's
invest.
Overwatch, right? Is
Yeah,
the
they investigate that clip of the guy smurfing, and then they can say, oh, this guy smurfing.
so is this leaning more towards a community effort solution, because that's what Overwatch is.
Because you really can't do, you can't unless AI has gone through the several iterations of what a smurf is. You can't really automate that, I believe.
Yeah, that's fair, but like, where's the onus on quote unquote improving the smurfing situation?
I guess it's on the devs to give
Mhm.
players who play at the highest level or whatever
An
something to do.
incentive, an
Yeah.
incentive
Like
to not smurf.
for example, in Counter Strike you have the Face It League, right? Where up and comers they can
Right.
just go
Yeah.
there and play, and
Those
that
are
keeps them
actually good.
busy.
But that's not Valve though, right? That's
Like,
ESL.
yeah, we're moving again towards more of a community effort, or a
It
third
should
party.
be, yeah. Should it be a dev the devs who are supposed to do it, or
I don't think it should be a dev thing when it comes to that type of thing. I
Mhm.
think it should just be supported by the devs.
Yeah, the Zebs are. I think I'm warming up to the idea of. I mean, it's the community that has the problem because there's something that you said last time. Like, you can't blame a guy who created something for how people use it,
Mm.
right? So people are using it this way. People are smurfing. So I guess in a way, like a certain onus to the devs, like new modes, newcomer, unranked, or like
Yeah,
rank
put
S,
put as
rank
much
S.
measures that you can on the back end or in the interface itself. But I think the community, because Smurfs are part of the community, they're high ranking players. Like
Yeah,
it's there's also an onus on the community to self correct.
Yeah,
yeah.
definitely. How do you keep them from getting bored at the highest tier?
I
Or
mean,
yeah,
that's just how queue works, eh. Like there
yeah. I
aren't
mean,
really
there
that
are
many
fewer
people.
people in the queue, so
Yeah.
that's why I resorted to smurfing initially in League. Like 30-minute queues versus 20-minute games. It's not stonks.
Because
Initially, yeah, go ahead.
chasing for the number one spot isn't enough. You know, when
Yeah,
you're ranking and then you're part of the global leaderboard and then you're already in the top 100, and then what, right?
beyond bragging rights, not much.
Yeah,
I mean,
like
you move to
what do I
tourneys.
do?
Well, they just find the game fun. I mean, even the number one of, let's say, Valorant or League still religiously plays the game because number one is such an easy thing to get toppled. Like there's no dominant Michael Schumacher 7-time world champion number one on top of the
The
leaderboards,
leaderboards.
right?
Well, what? Okay, go on.
Uh they if you're the number one guy, you're still gonna have to keep working on your game. Because some up and comer, some young gun is out there to get you.
But what about the dude that's fine with just being in the top 100 who doesn't care about being number one? What about
What
him? What
like
about the dude who's
His smurf.
content with just being in the top 100? Like he knows he's already part of the best.
oh, the why will he smurf? Because he
Because he,
wants to play.
doesn't care about being number one. He wants to
Mm,
play, but he
yeah,
He
doesn't
just
feel
can.
like there's anything more for him in the
that's why
top
he's resorted
tier.
to smurfing.
Yeah.
Because it does make quote unquote the game easier and you're still winning. And like I said, it take well I didn't say, but it takes a certain mindset to like smurf maliciously, right? Like, you wanna just like what Schadenfreude, just ruin people's days. But
Mm.
then when you're on the receiving end of that, you don't really take the time to think of what the other person's reasons are. You just know that you're getting screwed. So
And that gets
Because
in the head of the
yeah,
person at that actual level, right?
yeah,
it's essentially lying. Eh. Even if we're saying that,
it is. Yeah, it is because you're
right?
not true to the skill level you were already given. And that goes the same for people. Well, I guess boosting is a different topic altogether, but
There's
That's
finance.
cheating.
Yeah,
that's
that's
cheating. That's cheating.
so given that we've narrowed it down to smurfing is simply lying about your true skill level. Then can we say it's more towards the bad in the spectrum of gamer morality, quote
I
unquote?
mean, if you're going to go morality and you're going to use the word lying, I mean,
I mean, yeah, exactly.
right?
It's already
Regard,
wrong,
It's
man.
already
yeah.
wrong,
So
man.
it's wrong. So it's wrong.
But it's like when we go to lying, sometimes it's not white lie, right?
No, no. What I meant was so we've come to the conclusion that okay, this is wrong, pero there are still some justifications behind why you smurf that makes it somewhat palatable. But in the long run, I think it's bad for the competitive environment.
It
I guess
Because
definitely is.
it definitely is. I don't think there's gonna be any contest about that. It's just that the way things are right now, uh, people will smurf. Like I said, either maliciously, either to play with their friends. And I think the most difficult thing about it is that we can't pinpoint what the reasons are, so we can't tell if this is malicious smurfing or not. Right?
mm,
Go back to that. But it
well,
will
well,
exist. It's bad for the community because of the negative parts. But for the people who just want to have fun and everything, I guess that's the white lie of it. But
How
How are we
about
gonna stop the trend of smurfing then? If we all agree right now unanimously that it's bad for the longevity of any game.
I don't think it is though.
Not that bad.
Yeah,
it really depends on how the person takes it. Eh.
yeah, exactly.
Mm,
What if, for example, let's say a new game like Splitgate, you get into it and everyone is just good. So the mentality for you as someone who can handle the idea of trying to get good at the game is to get better, right?
mhm.
And that's part of going against Smurfs. Like I have to be better at the game so I can go against Smurfs.
But that's still a huge. Sometimes
That's
I get what you mean. That can be like. I mean, that's how I personally learned like CS:GO. You get shot in the head so many times until you learn to shoot their heads first, right? Fine, but there is a gap sometimes big enough in Smurfs where it's just insurmountable at some point. I think in some
like
games, especially
knowledge. It's
yeah,
not just with the mechanical
it's not
skills,
just
right?
mechanical skills, and that's what makes it difficult.
And that
Again,
makes
it's
it an individual choice, right? Of
of
do I deal with Smurfs or do I complain about it and blame it on them?
But
And
the problem is not everyone. That's like a small percentage. That kind of mindset
the
requires a
people that
certain
have that
maturity.
drive, right? Especially if
Yeah.
we're talking about a game that has a casual.
Let's say Fortnite, man. Like I haven't played Fortnite at all, but I'm assuming there are people like I've heard
Uh,
Tifu, this guy who's super strong in Fortnite, and he goes Smurf in a 100 man lobby, and the kids who play the game get crushed by Tifu, and when they know it's Tifu, they just it's Tifu. No way am I going to come up against that. But there are other people who would think like, oh my god, it's Tifu, and then I had a chance to kill him. I just have to be better. This is a small percentage of people.
I mean, we don't have the data, so we can't tell, but that's where it's leaning to. Yeah. So yeah, I guess at the end of the day, I think Daryl's right. It depends on the people being smurfed on, like how they deal.
Oh,
But that's such a like
I think
it's a non-answer.
the best solution for this
Hmm.
is how people are rewarded at the end of the game.
That's true. If we can get metrics, I
can you
get what you mean. I
expound on
get
that idea? Like, how would the reward difference make any, or how
like.
would you reward differently?
All right, let's go with Daryl first, but I have some ideas as well.
It's hard to say because
Let me try fleshing it out. Like um, the reward system. Like if you're going, for example, a ranked game, it's just WL, right? It's win lose.
Hmm.
But what if you have like metrics like you did well, maybe you lose less points
yeah,
kind of
so
thing, right?
something like
Yeah,
that, right? And Valorant is doing that right now, but
yeah.
it's
But
not to the
it's
extent of
but
it solving the problem.
yeah, I don't think it can solve the problem because at some point there are roles that in Valorant at least, there are roles that will not yield as many quote unquote points
Yeah,
as
that's
let's
true.
say a role like a duelist,
The
right?
things outside of the box
The
score.
things outside of the box matter, and that's not something backend can achieve.
The
But I guess if we're
intangibles, the
yeah, the
intangibles.
Yeah,
intangibles.
yeah, the
As much as we
intangibles.
laugh about it, they do exist, right? So I get what Daryl is saying, and I think that's a good step forward into the future of gaming if it gets that exhaustive. But as it
People have
stands
to,
now,
yeah, like bigger companies would have to look into their reward system and how they reward certain things.
but I think that's a very, very important thing that I'll put out because rewards are one of the reasons why you keep playing something that you're good at. It's because at the end of the day, it's reinforcing. It's like, oh, you're good at this game here, right?
Yeah.
That contributes to
That
fun.
contributes to the enjoyment, to the fun,
Uh,
and if you can get some of that through the person that's smurfing against you, then that will really go a long way towards ameliorating the problem.
like it's just unfortunate. Like for example, that requires some historical data, right? Like if you're a Smurf and you join lower queues and you continually beat upon people, how do you say you're not? You're just. How do you say that you came from CS:GO and you went from Valorant and you're just that good, right?
I
Uh,
mean, cases like that will even out, right? Because if you came from Valor, if you came from a different game with similar tactics and you're smurfing on low levels, I don't think there's any other way, right, to get
yeah,
to your level beyond doing that. So I don't think that counts as smurfing. You're just making a new account and you're
like
getting to where you are supposed to be.
yeah. But the reward system will affect you because if you continuously, own people in the new game that you're going to, because you came from
Uh,
another game, then that Smurf quote unquote detection system will put a check on you and say, instead of earning 22 rank points, you're only earning 5 because you've been smashing people too much.
that's true because you need a
And
fast
then
track from people that are good when they start versus
yeah, yeah,
people
yeah.
who you think are smurfing. Again, these are so difficult for any backend to
And then in the
detect.
essence, like the rank system would work that way. If you're owning consistently day in and day out, then you're gonna increase your rank and you're gonna go to your correct rank anyway.
Yeah,
But it's just that the people you step on to
along
get
the
to
way
your
you're
correct
gonna
is not gonna have a good time
And that doesn't stop the person from just making a new account and doing it all over
over again.
again.
get. Yeah.
So I guess it's like we have to tag a person to an account. But
Yeah,
that's a
they
You
big
need
need to
ask.
to
make it
value that
valuable. They
already.
need to make
Yeah.
the account valuable.
Need to make your primary account valuable so that you won't even think of smurfing because I don't want to grind this and that again,
Exactly.
or I don't want to get these rewards are gonna be redundant, that kind of thing.
Yep. So those kinds of things are already in place. It's just that there are a lot of people who are gaming the system, so to speak, like leveling like new accounts so that they can sell it to Smurfs and things like that.
Oh, those are the malicious ones, and those are the ones that need to be stopped. But
Mm.
like we've just said, it's really so difficult to
So in essence, I think people or devs are putting some countermeasures in place.
place. Yeah.
And we have some things like the Overwatch system that could be improved upon, and you have your reward system to be reinvestigated. But at the end of the day, there are malicious people who will still take advantage of it, and
Of
the
course.
Smurfs who
Yeah. Oh,
will,
okay.
uh, the Smurfs who are currently smurfing will eventually go up in rank to their correct rank.
And then they just make a new account. Do it. The cycle continues, and if you're on the other end, then what? Deal. Play another game with the same problems.
Mm.
Play another game with different problems.
But it's not so bad. I think that the lower rankers
Not.
are.
Yeah, it's not end of the world thing. It's a mounting frustration kind of thing.
Mm, mm.
It's where okay, fine. I'm up against these people today. Let's just call it a night. Try again tomorrow, kind of thing. But it's not the I'm gonna uninstall the game. I don't think it's that level.
And I think a lot of people need to realize that you're playing something competitive.
Yeah,
That's why
yeah.
these
If
people
you
are
are
so
playing,
sweaty.
if you are playing competitive, you have to know what that entails,
Yeah,
right?
Be
right?
prepared to get shit
Be
on, right?
prepared.
Yeah, exactly.
Like that's
Goes back to the game modes help then because you won't have that if the reason why you made the Smurf just play casual with friends.
I think the biggest I guess this is addressed to people who are frustrated and they think people are always smurfing on their lobbies, and then they keep on, I guess, complaining, or it makes the situation bad for them. I think for those people, you just have to really shift your perspective into thinking, okay, fine, these are Smurfs, but they're still people. They were able to get to where they are or how their skill level by practicing. So in the end, if I really wanna enjoy this game, I just have to get good.
Well, caveat there, if I want to enjoy the competitive side of this game,
Yeah.
there are many ways to enjoy the game, right? But
Mm-hmm,
yeah,
mm-hmm.
I get it.
But if
And
you're
I think
constantly worrying about
yeah,
the
that's
Smurf on the other team, right?
gonna
Just
affect
don't
your
worry about it. Just play better. Like in
Yeah,
yeah.
essence, that's the
exactly.
mindset that you should have.
But that's zoning in on the competitive side. I get that.
Yeah.
And I guess those are where most of the complaints are, let's be honest, right? People who
Mm.
are trying to climb and can't because quote unquote Smurf.
And people who are playing unranked aren't even complaining because it's unranked. Everybody can join
Yeah,
in. Of
everyone's
course, you're gonna
trolling.
face
Yeah.
yeah. Of course, you're gonna face people in freaking immortal or people in challenger.
Yeah. I guess
So
one of the things that as a person who's Smurfed before or who has had Smurfs, it's like when people complain, it's like, oh, people are Smurfing, and then now we're talking about it's like there really isn't like a catch-all solution right now. So it really is more of the current quote unquote solution. I think right now would be an internal thing, right?
An internal thing, and
Learning how to deal with it, cope with
yeah,
it.
that's the best. I think that's your best solution. While like devs and other community driven solutions are implemented, you just have to make yourself better at the game. You have to match that. Be the Smurf.
That's I think that's tagline you'd wanna espal.
Okay, so I think we arrived at a, I guess not really a not a non answer, but I guess there are some solutions that we mentioned that could be implemented to games, to competitive games especially that we have now that could, yes, tamper, not really solve it because it's kind of impossible to
It's yeah,
solve.
as things are, you're not
Yeah,
gonna solve it.
but it might mitigate the desire for making a Smurf. So speaking of dev related things, let's go on to our next topic, which is have devs figured games out. So what do we mean by figured? Meaning there have been, or there have been, I should say, there are a large number of games that have been created. Our library is humongous, from the age of SNES to the age of not to the age of the PS5 and to the PC games that we have now. It's a
Yeah.
large number of games that have been developed, and throughout all this, like for us three especially, we have seen games that have the same mechanics over and over again, and people keep buying them. And now devs seem to understand what works and what doesn't in terms of games. Would you agree? Like,
In terms of systems and mechanics, I suppose, yeah, there are trends. There are obviously trends, but I'm not sure how figured out games are when there are so many other concepts, unexplored concepts. I would say, but it's
yeah.
hard to put a finger on it.
So the idea is like you have your what I call the annual releases like Call of Duty and your Assassin's Creeds
There,
and your Far Cries that have like,
franchises at this point.
yeah, your open world, what do you call this, your open world formula, or your shooter formula, or now it's the battle royale formula, right? That
Yeah,
they try to just put a little spin on it. Like for example, you have Ark, which is a, the survival craft genre is another thing because of Minecraft. So you have Ark, which has freaking dinosaurs, and you have Tarkov, which is kind of survival, kind of a shooter, but it's more hardcore. Then you have your CODs and your battlefields. Uh, the biggest thing, I think, the driver for these, formulaic games, so to speak, would be financials, because these are games created by huge companies like Blizzard and EA, and they know it works. So it's reliable, it's a safe investment. It's The problem is, how do we, as I guess as a community who likes games, tell these publishers or tell these developers that it's okay to take a risk and go for something more. Like how do we provide something fresh from the formulaic things that we're doing right now?
providing that the only way that we're gonna provide that is if we buy those risks. But the fact that they are risks, some people aren't gonna buy them, and if dev gets burned one too many times, they're not gonna get take risks. I think the one word I wanted to contest the most when you were doing that spiel is the word works.
Mm-hmm.
Because what works for the devs, what works for the companies, what works for the people, they're all different. I mean, works in terms of financial would be like good sales, right?
Mm.
But good sales doesn't necessarily make a good game,
This is true.
an
This is true.
enjoyable game, right? I think this
Also,
is very broad topic. I'm trying to.
I think let's define,
Mm,
first, what do we mean by a good game, because there are
that
tons
is
of
so
ways to define
supremely
it,
subjective,
right?
though.
Right. So there
Are we
are
rubric kind of thing?
No,
Are
not
we gonna
really a
go?
rubric. I don't think we can go that far as to define. It would take a lot of study and research to
Right,
do that.
right.
So
Let's say Call of Duty Modern Warfare, the first one.
Yeah,
Let's use that as the benchmark.
of
yeah. Spawned
of a
everything.
good game.
Yeah, of a good game, because it brought new things, right? And then it became the formula for which future COD games were built upon.
Hmm. I mean, I guess I can agree with that because narratively, even though the campaign was so short, it was enjoyable. It gave like the the freaking I'll take the left, you take the right.
Yeah,
The sniper mission in Pripyat, was it in Pripyat?
I think
Uh,
so. I think so.
it gave us that, and then the freaking run and gun in Backlot or in Crash. I still remember those days where I would run silenced MP5 with a red dot sight and just
But
cream on
I
people.
guess I don't know if this is gonna make us meander more, but I just like to point out
I mean, that's the name of the
what
podcast,
part.
my guy.
What yeah, true. What part of this is because it's a good game, and what part of this is because it's a novelty. It's like something that we haven't experienced before, but we experienced it here, so we stuck to this one. Because there are games like Call of Duty, like Medal of Honor is one, right? Uh,
Hmm.
they're both like old franchises. I remember Medal of Honor from PS1, where you don't even have the friggin' the joystick, not the joystick. What do you call the knobs? Oh my god, I sound like a fucking boomer.
Analog
The
sticks.
analog sticks, right? Imagine playing. I
The
have played
knobs.
Medal of Honor 1999 on a PS1 controller without analog,
Yeah,
and
man.
damn, right? So which part of this is like novelty? Which part of this is good game?
Well, for novelty, it brought Call of Duty to the next generation. It was
Fair.
also fast paced compared to the previous entries.
Mm.
And it was the first ever modern iteration of Call of Duty.
So
Yeah.
it innovated on, not really innovated, I guess iterated on theme, mechanics, and narrative.
Yeah.
So,
Okay. Moving forward, then that's a benchmark.
but
So
but it's
as
kind of
of
hard
now,
to say. Sorry, go ahead.
yeah, go. No, 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 go ahead.
So there are games that have iterated on the same um mechanics or just repeated or parroted what came before it, but essentially made it better.
Can you
Like
give an example?
the FF7 remake. It's the same mechanics as, or the battle system is the same mechanics as FF15 or an improvement of that. Yeah, FF15, the boy band one. The narrative is essentially a revamp of the PS1 release. And the graphics, of course, brings it to the next generation. I think that's the one where you innovate a lot.
Several generations.
Several
Yeah,
generations,
yeah.
right? But essentially, it's still the same JRPG. And we also can't discount the fact the nostalgia boners that the fanboys had when they heard the bombing run orchestral design on the trailer. I bet a lot of people creamed their pants after hearing that. So there are good games that have parroted mechanics from previous iterations,
Mhm.
not to the extent of Call of Duty 4, mind you, but can still be considered good games. Dragon Quest, for example. I think I would say Dragon Quest 11 is a good game.
I
It's a time sink for sure, but
don't have experience with that one.
it gets a lot of its tropes, a lot of its narrative, a lot of its battle systems from previous Dragon Quests, and it's a good game. Not a great game, but a good game.
So what part of this is like solved then? Like what have the devs figured out? Because not all games in the franchise are good, right?
I mean, you just look at the freaking
But
sports
the
ball
effort
releases, man.
is yeah, like people are complaining, especially like sports games here, right? They're just basically regurgitating, they're just updating rosters. The gameplay
Essentially,
mechanics aren't, how do you improve upon
how
it?
do you? Yeah, it's been like 10 years of the same FIFA game how it's really a tough ask for you to just come up with an entirely new mechanic for a
Yeah,
football game,
which
which has
is a solved
existed,
game.
which has existed for even I think now a century.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but do you just keep selling the same game reskinned?
Bro, if it keeps selling, I'm selling it.
So that's what? Is that a game that works, but it's not a good game?
That's a good point. Devs have found out what works versus devs have not yet essentially. I know, I think they have. Because there
Hmm.
are books on game development that have say put this in your game or innovate on these certain aspects of a game. I haven't read any game dev literature, but I have seen people recommend like read XNO or something. So we have documentation and some literature around creating a good game. So in that perspective, maybe you can say it's figured.
I guess, yeah.
I guess.
Like
I
you
think
have
there's been
milestones
enough
that work,
time.
right?
Yeah.
Hmm.
There's been enough time that in any particular genre that you might enter in as a game dev, there are quote unquote must haves. I guess that's the figured out portion, right?
We have a codified thing, like for example, progression.
Hmm.
Like progression is essential when you're doing RPGs. Even now, it's essential when you're doing shooters, right?
Can I bring up FF8 when we go progression
Okay, okay,
in
fine, go,
terms of
go.
gameplay, right?
What about FF8?
FF8, the enemies scale with you, right? So you are actually incentivized not to get too strong. If I
Hmm.
remember correctly, it's been a really long time since I played FF8, and it was unpopular because of that. Because people couldn't go on their power trips because the enemy scaled along with them. In fact, you shouldn't level your characters. I think you should only level up your GFs, if I remember correctly.
The Guardian
Did
Forces.
either of you
I
finish the
can't
game?
remember because
Bro,
I just played the card game.
Ah,
I
yeah,
only remember freaking Quetzalcoatl. And because it's I didn't even know how to pronounce it. It's Quetzalcoatl, right? How you actually say it. But I don't know how to actually say it when my cousin started playing it. And
Hmm.
then I actually wondered. So I saw him fighting early on, like a level 40 Tyrannosaurus Rex type monster. I remember him fighting that specifically, and he beat it. And then when I saw he was level 99, the T Rex was also level 99, and he's doing all these fancy shit, but it's still taking a lot of punishment because it's also level 99. So yeah, I guess for action games, um, progression in essence is learning new moves. But in action games, you want enemies to take a lot of punishment. But when it comes to JRPGs or RPGs in general, you want your progression to have an effect on the world and the monsters that you fight.
That's fair.
Sorry, I kind of went off topic there.
I mean, yeah. I mean, it's really hard because if we're gonna do with the figured out thing, I think we have to stick to a genre. But generalizing it is difficult. But I guess we all kind of get it, right? Like there are some things that just have to be there. Good
Hmm.
progression, like I don't know,
The gunplay in FPSs,
yeah,
like
the
they
gunplay and
need to
FPS.
they need to
Like
feel good, right?
yeah, we were talking about this earlier. Like all the archetypes are there, but can they introduce a new gun? Will it just be new characters? Will they just be rebalancing existing guns?
How do you even create a new gun for that? Like it's so hard.
I mean, that's the point, right? It's hard to call a game like that solved when balancing is still a thing. Because if a game is solved, you wouldn't have to balance it, right?
Well, I also think that calling a game solved when it can be updated is not correct. The only way a game can be solved, like chess, or actually even now, the chess is not solved, right? We're so we know a
Fundamental.
lot about it such that we can have AIs tell you your move is good or your move is bad. But there are still styles being created nowadays that defy convention but are a better approach to things. So I think essentially a game is essentially solved if there is no updates left for it to, or no one is updating that game. Because
Hmm.
in the end, people are, even if you say that the game is dead, meaning no one is updating it or the devs aren't updating it, there's still that niche community. It's gonna make mods for it. That's gonna crack another, like the speedrunning community, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Like
definitely.
they're gonna find bugs in it. They're
How
gonna
to
find
break a game.
glitches. Yeah. So would you say that a game that is um I guess the correct term would be no game is essentially solved 100%.
But that's not what we were talking about. Like the topic is
Figured
devs.
out.
Oh shit, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
have they figured out the formula for games? Like what I'm saying with franchises and how
but we
they're
have
more or less the similar game, a
mm,
similar right like throughout the year.
throughout the years. So that kind of figured out, but that doesn't necessarily put a positive spin on it, right?
I would put an asterisk saying they figured out their audience.
That's fair, I think.
Yeah, that's fair.
I mean, yeah, they know their audience by now, so it's not gonna be up to them to bring something fresh. But at the same time, like
It's a buyer's market, right? You
right.
have to.
So they've figured out games like that, like franchises, like how to sell it. Like yeah, we've went across this. Something that works doesn't necessarily mean it's good, but it
Yeah.
will sell. So that's
If,
what they
if
make.
if there are people who are willing to buy the same thing over and over again, then the company is just gonna make the same thing over and over again.
Mm. I think one of the things I put here for figuring it out is like it's gonna be profitability versus enjoyment. Like it's the devs versus their market.
And as a dev, like speaking from the creative side of things or the development side of things, it's gonna, if you're just keep on doing the same thing over and over again, it's gonna get dull at some point.
I'd like to
Right?
segue into WoW, but that's a different topic altogether.
Yeah, exactly. And then you have devs like Blizzard who
Yeah.
just re-released WoW again, right?
One of the biggest gripes that people have with WoW, I think, I stopped playing a long time ago, but one of the things is how they basically erase the feeling of your progress with each new release. Because the shit and your glam and your swag at the point in time where you are at the top of that expansion will all be rendered useless
Useless.
by the time the next one comes around. I mean,
But
if we're gonna get into this, I have a lot to say, but that sounds like a different
I mean,
topic.
sure, let's get into it. I think, I mean, we're not putting
Like a
any
game
limit on this
like
shit.
WoW,
Yeah, and
because
I think
mm,
sorry to interrupt, but I think
yeah,
that's how devs go outside the mold of having the game figured out
yeah,
and making something formulaic. Anyway, go on.
yeah, that's the problem. I mean, the only thing they can make WoW fresh now, and what have they been trying to do since I think Wrath of the Lich King is introducing new systems, and it sort of becomes a chore. And at what point does the enjoyment that you derive from succeeding or finishing that chore counteract the fact that it seems like a tedious thing? Because that's what's happening in WoW. Like the progress is just reset back to zero every expansion. So it's kind of depressing actually. Like how do you make that fresh? How do you make the sense of achievement from the players who've played the Burning Crusade or base WoW up until current expansion? How do you make the basically the achievements back then? How do you make it relevant to now? Hard ask. But at the same time, I don't think Blizzard is going about it the right way.
Actually, regarding that, like the continuous iteration of sequels and expansions,
Hmm.
I've I've read somewhere that there are now game companies who do not want to create sequels.
Yes, I've read something similar. Like especially indie games. Indie games make like they churn out one and done games. They pat themselves on the back and then they call it a day because the moment the word sequel comes out and the moment the word expectations come out, it's so hard. I think that's one of the reasons why Mass Effect 3 ending was so difficult. Like as a player, I didn't like that ending. But at the same time, like if you go into the shoes of the dev, how would you cap off something that big?
So epic. It took actually 5 years, right? 5 years or a decade almost to get to that level, to that point. But taking it in the perspective of the developer on the WoW side thing again,
Mm,
how do you make the systems feel fresh after what 6, 7 expansions? That is such a hard ask because if you introduce a new system, say introduce a new class, how do you make the older classes feel relevant?
like I think at this point, are you continuing playing the game for the gameplay or for the story?
That's also that's also one thing because the
Right?
freaking Final Fantasy 14, right?
Mm.
Like people are saying it's the
I'm
best
playing it for the
story, right? I
I mean,
haven't.
the first part wasn't so great. It was a bit slow, but when you get to Heaven's Word and forward, I mean, I guess part of it is also a nostalgia boner because it's Final Fantasy.
Mhm.
It's a final. You expect a good story from Final Fantasy. It's part of the reason why you're playing the game in the first place. But in a game like WoW, have they overdone the expansion? I get wanting to continue the story. I get it, but the gameplay, the gameplay doesn't really change.
So when does it break from being
Like hot take, do we just say okay, let's stop the MMORPG genre and continue the story in another? Is that gonna work?
That's what they did. That's what they did, right? Warcraft 3, they switched genres and continue the story in an MMO.
Right. Is it time to do that again, but to another genre? Because I think it's decaying at how it is. I mean, they're making bank. That's undeniable. Like I don't want to mention the lawsuit and anything, but like despite the current problems, they're still making bank. They still have investments, and I guess I don't know if I want to move it to this topic, but like
It's
passion
really
projects versus
yeah,
cash flows.
it's really the business side of things that dictate what the creatives are gonna work on. Because if
Is
people,
that sentence in itself, is that acceptable?
it's a business, it's capitalism.
Hmm.
It's not a question of acceptable, but are you gonna accept reality?
Right. I mean, you can stop playing the game, but how do you get the story without playing the game? You read the books. Are the books good?
but do you suffer through a terrible or mediocre game just for
Just
Just for
that?
the story.
Yeah.
and from what I've heard, I can't confirm nor deny, not a good story either. With how things are right now.
Well,
Well,
it really just depends on the person, right? If it because a lot of people are playing it, I think for the nostalgia of old WoW.
yeah.
A lot of people stuck
WoW
through it
was the
because of the
perfect.
communities that formed, their friends. I believe a lot of lovers or couples have been formed through WoW.
Mm.
So yeah, it was a, as you say, it's a perfect storm for it was a product of its time. In terms of moving forward with the story, with the key mechanics, with the engine, that's just up to the consumers and the subscribers for WoW. So
I
if
don't think that's accurate.
Mhm.
It's not up to the subscribers and the WoW players are up in arms because they feel that their opinions aren't being heard, right?
Mhm.
They don't like the game, and I think one of the worst ways the recent expansion has been called is that the expansion was itself was just a testing. And then they just release it and people test it, tell them what's wrong, but they don't do anything with it anyway. That's the general feel that I'm getting. It's starting
Well,
to get to the point where that's why Blizzard is in hot water right now. It's because the players don't feel like they're being catered to anymore.
right. But what I meant with subscribers being the one to dictate it is they stop their subscription if they don't like it. They voice their grievances and have their power be realized by unsubscribing. Because that's the only way consumers will ever have power over the
If they
creator of
stop consuming the
yeah.
product. That's fair. Makes you wonder.
So going back,
Yeah, going back.
have developers figured out games? For some, I think yes, but I think we all agree that there is a, a lot of room for innovation in games. That
Hard
yes,
finding them right
yeah,
now.
that there are formulaic games that work because people continuously buy them, like your Maddens and your PGA Tours and your NBAs and your FIFAs. They continue to buy them because they're not gamers per se, but they're fans of the sport, and that's what these companies
Franchise.
are leaning on. And they don't really care if the game mechanics change or not. They just want to play, their sport on a video game.
Yeah.
Uh, and then for other games such as GTA, these franchise marquee shooters, I guess you can include Apex Legends there. You can include battle royales like Fortnite.
Mm.
Um, these formulaic games are are being iterated upon, like updated continuously with seasons and additional content simply because they're popular.
Yeah.
Um, and that's what devs have figured out. But there are hidden gems out there like freaking Hades,
Yeah.
Bastion. Uh,
I think I
what?
like what you said about Apex at one point. Is that there was no media surround. The game was good. That's why it got popular, right?
Mm. The game spoke for itself. Like they
It
just
spoke for
farted
itself.
it out and like, hey, player Titanfall Battle Royale. It's awesome, but there are no big robots. And people played it and
Hmm.
they
That's
were
how it spread.
impressed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the cheaters came.
And then the cheaters
And
That's
came.
a whole nother
then,
can of
then
worms.
Fire Nation attack, bro.
It's
Fire Nation attack.
a whole other can of worms. So I think in essence, we agree some games have been figured out
Yeah.
because the effort there's huge. Like companies are putting so much manpower on that. But on the plus side, we have these indie companies who are pushing boundaries in terms of game mechanics. I think speaking of pushing boundaries, I heard this one game where the game mechanic is waiting.
Waiting?
Yeah, you have to wait for a certain number of days until something happens in the game. I forgot the name.
Which
Yeah, it was a small indie game.
thing?
Um, there are also, I guess, the double A genre. I think we have that in our notes somewhere. That the double A genre has been receding, but actually, I think there's an uptick of double A games. So if you've seen um the recent PlayStation showcase where they show this Korean um
The
action game
the one
that
with
look
kids. The one with kids.
no, yeah, that one, that's Dokkebi.
Yeah,
I
yeah, yeah.
remember. But there's the other one. It's where it's a fantasy or an action, spectacle action game similar to DMC and Bayonetta, where you're this sexy space girl with a skin tight
Project
suit.
Eve.
Yeah, Project Eve. And there's this other game that's also a double A game from a Korean developer, which has some Souls-like mechanics where you're locked into your animation, but the animation is fast. So it's a bit of a spectacle fighter. And there's quote unquote weapon durability, wherein there's a certain count in your weapon where you can use it. And then if it turns to zero, there's a special attack that you can do. And then it resets the weapon's power basically.
Mm.
So I forgot that game. And the famous Wukong Black Wukong game, the from the Chinese developer that uses Unreal Engine that looks so good. Have you guys seen that trailer?
I've seen Wukong.
No,
Yeah.
it's the first time I'm hearing about it.
Yeah, it's from a Chinese dev and it looks really good. Maximilian has done a lot of reactions to the trailers. Uh yeah. So I think AAA games will stay in their lane because it's gonna earn them a lot. And you have your indie games which is looking towards creating new ground for indie development or for game mechanics. And then there are now the emergence of some AA games. I think majority of them from Asian developers
Yeah.
that
Getting into the market.
straddle, the line of great graphical polish and innovating on current game systems, but not to the degree of like wild game system revamps and such. Just reiterating on those like souls like conventions, roguelike conventions, and just making refining them further. Right. So I think with that we can conclude the first episode. I believe that's been around 2 hours or an hour and a half of discussion. I
An
think.
hour
So,
and a half
Yeah,
around.
yeah, yeah.
I
Yeah.
think it's a pretty good note to end it. Um,
I
we
was
have
gonna
no
add
set.
something, but
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead, man. Go ahead.
Before we
no,
close.
no, like you talked about indie devs and stuff like that, right? And we're talking about formulas that AAA games have. Is it really on indie devs to look for new things in video games?
Are they responsible for
I
it?
don't
Yeah,
think they're
yeah,
responsible for it, but they're more likely to go for it because the AAA games have to look at the bottom line.
yeah. And with that being said, though,
I think
why
that you
can't
have a.
why
Go
can't
ahead.
the
Sorry.
AAA devs do the same?
They can. I really do think they can. But they're too afraid to miss that bottom line because of that risk. So they're probably not. Unless it
S-
bites them in the foot hard enough. Like,
Speaking of that, like AAA devs looking for something new. Have you guys seen Forspoken?
What?
what?
Forspoken.
Force open?
Forspoken.
Spoken, right.
Forspoken.
No.
It's a new game by Square Enix, and it's way different. Not. I guess it uses the FF15 engine, but the concept of it, the theme of it, the characters involved in it are way different than their usual guapo boys and pretty girls with nice assets. It's way more. It's way fantastical and way more Western than what I'm used to from Square Enix.
We'll see.
So
We'll see. Maybe they will. Maybe they will like surprise us, and the AAA can still bring something fresh.
yeah. So in my perspective, like it's kind of depressing that the heads of EA and all these are not really devoting enough budget to R&D of new game mechanics and new IPs, new games, etc.
Right.
But I
That's
don't think indies have the responsibility. It's just that they have the desire to do it. That's why they're
they're more
indies.
willing to take the risk.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And a
That's true.
lot of developers from indie companies come from triple A's because they got tired of creating the same thing over and over again. They wanted to have their own vision.
Because I'll use the Metroid series as an example. They were able to take a big risk by bringing Metroid into the first person realm
Mm-hmm.
and it being a success.
Platformer, yeah.
Yeah, from the platformer to first person. And they have the capability to take those types of risks, right? But we're not seeing it now.
I think the trend right now is that the Asian ones are doing the innovating. The
You
Western
know why they took that risk? Because it's Metroid. It had a
of a solid
follower base.
following, a solid fan base. Like even if it turned
Because
out to be a bad game, it would work, quote unquote.
exactly. Because like the Metroid fanboys would still buy it. It just turned out like it was an amazing game.
Happened to be a good game.
Yeah.
Thank God.
I
That's
guess.
why they said, okay, I'll give you the green light. The popularity of Same was out, I guess, mitigated the risk of that game
And
failing.
this will bring me to a different one if you want to talk about it. But like, there's that burden of expectation on indie, and it's separate from the burden of expectation on AAA. And then again, there's another dimension to whether or not it has a following. If it's something completely fresh, it's really difficult to eke out something. But it's easier to take a risk when, like, yeah, in Metroid, you already have a solid following or even a cult following that will play the games. Like, which is how the Persona series came about, right? It's a spin-off of the actual developer
Freaking
was SMT, right?
freaking Atlas, man.
Atlas.
Freaking Atlas.
Their
Like,
cult series turned out to be way more, well, not really way, but you know,
yes, I agree. Like
mainstream,
internationally, it's way more acceptable, quote unquote.
palatable maybe.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, well, one of the one of the examples I had was Divinity Original Sin,
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
man.
Yeah.
Larian Studios, right?
Yeah,
They
yeah.
were new, and they killed it with that game. And then they made Divinity Original Sin 2, and that was good too. And now they're handling Baldur's Gate, and now the expectations seem to be a bit more than they can handle. Like,
Yeah, that's true.
right
Yeah,
now,
yeah, yeah.
like there's this burden that, oh, you were successful,
Because
can
now
you
they're
be
on a pedestal.
yeah, again and again and again, and
Yeah.
it wears you down.
Bro, CD Project Red.
CD Project Red, right?
CD
Witcher
Project
3
Red.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
Cyberpunk. What happened to Cyberpunk? I had fun playing Cyberpunk, but even I couldn't deny that it wasn't a game that was released. It
It
was
was
like,
not the game that was promised to us.
yeah,
Give me a second. I'm gonna drink a sip of water.
so it's
Ridiculous, man.
I guess the overall thing that we've seen, and it's really difficult, especially when it comes to what works and what is good, and
And
Well,
what is something you want to make?
yeah, and
Right.
what is something you want to make. Those are all three different dimensions of
well,
this
with
game, and
I
as
guess
we see,
with
go
this
on.
discussion, we can conclude that games aren't really figured out. There are a lot of things left to discover. A lot of avenues to pursue. It's just that people are afraid to go out of the beaten path.
And there are formulas now compared to before.
Yeah,
They're
Mhm.
safe.
that are
They're
safe. Yeah.
safe, and that will, yeah, like we said, it works, but it's not good,
Yeah, yeah.
right?
Being safe doesn't equate to it being good.
Unfortunate. You guys want to wrap up here? There's one thing I wanted to bring up, but I don't know how much we can talk about it.
I think I'm not really sure how long the record is, but give it a shot.
All right.
Or we can save it for the next one.
That's true. I mean, I don't think games is a topic we're ever gonna run out of.
Yeah.
All right, I
Yeah.
guess we're gonna cut it here. Um, for the next session or the next podcast episode will be releasing probably a week after this one. So watch out for that, guys. Whoever stuck around, thanks for listening to us meander about. Again, this is Kevin or Lico, Ramon, and Daryl for the Meandering Podcast. Signing out. Thanks, everyone. Bye bye.